Hey guys, so I'm going to try my hand at this video thing. I tried to do it so I can see myself, but then all the words were backwards. So the first thing was a lot of you have emailed me questions about your project. So this is how to do it. You do not have to have construction paper, just use white paper, or you can use Google Doc, or you can use Word. You just have to make 3 columns, because what you want is you want to have it landscape orientation, and you want to do 3 columns. So I just folded mine into thirds. If you do Google and you make it 3 columns, you'll have 3 columns. You'll just need 2 pages because you really need 6. But I have 3 on the back. So on your project, it tells you for each of these sections what to put on. Like you have to have a picture, where it's from originally and where it's spread to. So just make sure that you have 6 sections. So I would put something here, 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 and then on the back I would have something here, here, and here for my project. So that counts for day 5 and 6 of your packet. So that's like a 2-day thing. If you don't have internet, then I included 2 different pieces of information for 2 different organisms you could choose from. If you do have internet, there's a big list of organisms that you can choose from, and that might make yours a little bit different from other people's because you're maybe doing something that they haven't done. But you can always do research on it. But if you don't have a way to do research, then just use the 2 pages. Pick one of those. Don't do both. Pick one of them. Okay, so what I want to explain to you, because you don't have the benefit of me being in your house, is these cladograms. If you end up having to take the test in December, I have no idea what they're going to do. I really want you to know how to work these because these are a big part of the test. I wrote down a few. Oh man, always. And it back. That happens in class all the time. So some things that I wanted to go over how to do is common ancestor, how to figure out what traits it has, this word called clades, and how to figure out which things are most related, because that's probably the type of questions you're going to see. So what I did is I put this one up. This is the same exact information, but it's in 2 different layouts. So this is more like a tree layout, and this is the most common layout where it just kind of goes left to right up a hill. Every once in a while, they'll have one going down a hill, or they'll have this tree turned to the side, just to make life more difficult. You have several different things. So at the top, these are the names of organisms. So lobsters, spiders, perch, which is a type of fish, flounder, which is another type of fish, lungfish, which are kind of like fish, but they can live in the mud, lizards, birds, and then mammals, which would be everything that has fur and doesn't lay eggs except for the platypus. And then you see these traits or characteristics listed on there. So molt exoskeleton, which means it's got an outer skeleton and it's going to get rid of that. Vertebrae, that means it's got a backbone. That means everything from this point on has a backbone. So when we look at this, it's kind of like looking at a timeline. This would be the beginning of time. They're assuming that you had one organism, and as it goes through time, when it reached this point where it splits, something happened to make there become 2 organisms. We call that speciation. So it kind of split off into 2 groups right here. Okay? This group developed the ability to mold their exoskeleton. This group developed vertebrae, or hard backbones at this point. So these are, we would call them invertebrates, and these are vertebrates. So everything from here on has this trait of having an exoskeleton, which means they are not vertebrates. And everything from this point on has this trait. So once this trait appears, everything after this has that trait unless it specifically says that that trait disappears. Okay? So if I were to ask you, like the most common ancestor of all of these organisms would be the organism at this point in time. If I said what was the last common denominator of, let's say, lobsters and spiders, you would go to the last place where they were together. So this point right here would indicate the last place where they had a common ancestor. After this point, going through time, this group became more and more like lobsters. This group became more and more like spiders. Okay, so then this thing of traits. How do I know which traits it has? This is the easiest thing to figure out. Start at the organism and just work your way backwards towards the beginning. So if I were to ask you, what trait do lizards have? So I would start at lizards, and I would just trace back. I would go back to the main line. On my way, I hit this trait, see UV light. That means lizards can see UV light. I get back to the main one, and then I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. Okay? So lizards actually have 4 traits. They can see UV light. They also have this trait, which is amniotic egg, which is like eggs that you get from the grocery store that have the yolk inside. And as we go back, they also have lungs. They also have a vertebrae. So all of these traits that you pass on the way to lizards, lizards have. Lizards do not have spiny rayed fins. The only things that have spiny rayed fins are perch and flounder. So that's one of the easiest things is to just track it back all the way down the line. The same thing works if you were to come and look at this one. So again, if I take lizards, I'm going to work my way back. I get to here, I see UV light. I get to here, I have an amniotic egg. I get to here, I have lungs, vertebrae, and those are the 4 traits that I have. Whereas if I was a spider and I said, what traits does a spider have? A multisexoskeleton. And that's all we have on this cladogram. Obviously, spiders have more things. Different cladograms are made for different purposes, so different ones will have different traits that are given. Okay, so this word of clades, this is where the word cladogram came in. We're trying to divide organisms based on how related are they. The original ones, we could only use what we call morphological characters. That means how much do they look alike? It's really just physical appearance. That has a shell and that has a shell, they must be related. That has feathers, they must be related. Now that we have DNA evidence, we can, it can be just like a regular classroom with this. Now that we have DNA evidence, we can use DNA markers to tell exactly how related something is. So just because 2 things look alike doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually related. So the DNA gives us a lot better idea of how related they are. But the way that we show how related they are is that they're closer together on the cladogram and they would have more traits in common. So usually when we say a clade, we mean a small group that's closely related. So for instance, in this, lobster and spider would make up 1 clade because they are on this little branch together. And then perch and flounder would make up this clade. And lungfish don't really have one. You can consider them part of this large clade at the end, but more specifically, you have this bird and lizard group, and then you have the bird and lizard and mammal group, which also is part of a separate thing. So if I asked you what's most closely related to flounder, that would be pretty easy because perch is right there on that little branch with it. It's a little bit easier to see in this one because you can see this little branch here, how they're closely related. But then it gets a little bit tricky because when I get outside of this little group, which one is the next most closely related? Is it lungfish or is it mammals? So you go back and after you have this little group together, what's the next group you have? So the next group I have is this slightly bigger group. So that means mammals are more like birds and lizards than lungfish are. Now lungfish are part of this other bigger group, so lizards and birds are much more like mammals and lungfish than they are like anything on this side. These 2 would be kind of considered outliers because they are much different than everything else. So if you get a question like there was with the chameleons and how closely related are they, and you have to decide which ones go where, the most closely related are going to go on the same branch together. The next most closely related is going to go on the next closest branch. And one that you don't think is like anything else is going to go really far to the outside usually. Okay, and then that's the same thing with most closely related. You're going to look for these little branches that are together. If you get one where there are no branches on it, you're going to count traits. So let's say I didn't have birds. It's not there. And then I want to know what is most closely related to lizards. Is it lungfish or is it mammals? Okay, I would just count how many traits they have in common. So lizards have this one, this one, this one, this one. They have 4 traits. Now mammals don't have this trait. Mammals have amniotic egg, lungs, and vertebrae. But lungfish only have lungs and vertebrae. They don't have this amniotic egg. So that means that mammals share 3 traits in common with lizards, which means that mammals would be more closely related to lizards than lungfish, according to this cladogram. Okay, so if you're still stuck and you still have questions, remember you can email me. So my email address is just vtompkins@zenithacademy.org. So hope to see you guys soon. Send me pictures on Instagram. Love you. Bye.